Tell me, have you ever seen the African Union intervene directly or indirectly to prevent the collapse of a country? The African Union, among others, did intervene in the post-electoral crisis of 2011 in Cote d'Ivoire. And what was the result? The post-electoral crisis broke out anyway. So, when we look at the actions of the African Union across space and time, we are objectively and scientifically forced to say that it is a powerless organization. But it is not powerless because Africans are incapable of being powerful, but because it is led by Africans who have agreed to be guided by foreign interests. This is what we call an alienated organization. The African Union is an alienated organization, meaning that its focus is not on Africa, but rather on the agendas of Western neocolonial powers from the Middle East, and neocolonial and imperialist powers from both the West, the Middle East, and even the East, who are determined to ensure that Africa never stands on its own 2 feet. Because if Africa stands on its own 2 feet, they will no longer be able to continue plundering its uranium, its gold, its manganese, its coltan. They will no longer be able to continue plundering its diamonds, its oil, its gas. They will no longer be able to continue plundering its lithium. They will no longer be able to continue plundering its timber, its coffee, its cocoa, its cotton. These major Western and Middle Eastern powers want Africa to remain unstable because Africa's instability is the structural condition for its exploitability. The African Union is therefore, in effect, the armed wing of foreign domination over Africa. That is what it is. That is what it is. When you look at a certain point at some of those who have been, what do you call them? The presidents of the African Union Commission. I even wonder sometimes how they go about choosing a president of the African Union Commission. How can you appoint a president to the African Union Commission from a country that does not respect the law, does not respect the opposition, does not respect human rights? How is that even possible? When you look at the people who have often been appointed to lead the African Union Commission, you realize that it is not there to uphold the rule of law in Africa. It is not there to protect the people. It is not there to mediate conflicts. People delegated by dictators have ended up at the head of the African Union. How can you expect someone who is at the head of the African Union Commission because they were promoted by a dictator? How? Can you expect these people to defend the people against dictatorships on the continent? It is a dictator who sent him to represent his country at the head of the African Union. How do you expect someone like that to then go and fight against dictatorships and protect African people from regimes similar to that of his own country? Do you understand? So actually, no matter which angle you look at the African Union from, the African Union is a continental failure. It is a massive failure. And so, let's come to the Ivorian context. What did these people come to do in Cote d'Ivoire? The people from the African Union, what did they come to do in Cote d'Ivoire? My answer is very simple. They came to waste the Ivorians' time. They came to waste the Ivorians' time. Why? Because the African Union is dominated by the West, and Alassane Ouattara is supported by the West. This African Union delegation only came to try to make the Ivorian opposition swallow the bitter pill of dictatorship. In the same way, the United Nations is dominated by the major Western powers. These delegations, when they come to Africa, are there to make Africans accept the bitter medicine of Western neocolonialists, Western and Eastern imperialists, and Middle Eastern powers. So when you see a delegation from the African Union coming somewhere, know that it is carrying the message of the neocolonial powers that fund the African Union. They come bearing the message of the imperialist powers that fund the African Union. They do not come to speak on behalf of the African people. These African Union bureaucrats don't care about the people. They couldn't care less about them. Do you know why? The reason is very simple. They are not deputies. They are not elected by the African people. You are accountable to a people only if they have given you power. But when the people haven't given you power, why be accountable to them? You don't owe your power to them. The African Union has no obligation of accountability to the African people because it is not a union of the people. It is a union of the neo-colonized, imperialized, and alienated African oligarchy. That's the kind of union it is. And you will always remember that it is precisely because this union is like this that all Africans who wanted the African Union to become a sovereign African organization were fought by the African Union. They were fought by the African Union. It joined forces with those who killed them. Did you see how Gaddafi was assassinated in 2011? The African Union knew all the plans. But the NATO powers and those from the Middle East who joined forces to ravage Libya, assassinate the Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, and invade the entire Sahel with their terrorist organizations. But these powers, most of the countries in the African Union have very good relations with them, with those powers. The NATO countries, their relations have remained stable with most of the countries in the African Union, even though all the countries in the African Union know that it is NATO that has destabilized, that is destabilizing Africa. Take the countries of the Middle East, like Israel, like Saudi Arabia, like Qatar, countries that are at the heart of the destabilization of Africa every day. You don't see the countries of the African Union getting chummy with